my fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, you're particular, and there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions
No,
of
I got
relevant
that.
resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You've indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compel. Well, okay, compel. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by mythmakers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans. Right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
no
is
one is
molecularly.
those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result
No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And
Won't
you
admit the truth.
and you
Senator
implying
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond. Dr.
and you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent
could
that.
have
And
been.
if anybody
could
is
have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Redacted, everybody, on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And guess who's back in town? Yes, Natali is back in town.
Here I am.
Finally. Everyone's like, where's the woman? Where's
woman's back.
The woman is back after a week or more off visiting the States.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just fresh off the plane today from a visit to the U.S., and it was nice, but I'm glad to be back. We don't have the chat. I can't see anybody talking to us. We forgot to pull you up. We will get there.
Well, because she's all discombobulated. She's like, oh my God, how do I do this show again? I know.
Where do I sit? What do I do?
What buttons do I press? Do I have to do it? So we'll get the chat up and running it. Hey, but we've got a very busy show for you on this Tuesday. Welcome. We're live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Hope you're all doing well. We've got a very busy show. We're going to talk about the financial collapse that is being talked about quietly behind closed doors because they don't want the average person to know what's actually about to happen financially. And it may not come in the form that we're normally associating with like an economic decline, some sort of a COVID issue or some sort of a lockdown or pandemic or some other big issue. No. This is really a man-made crisis, and we're going to talk about bail-ins versus bailouts and what we're hearing from Bank of America. What are banks right now doing with your money? There's a lot to unpack tonight, and it's really, really terrifying. Really, I mean, I think about our own family, and I think about making sure that we do not have our money in this system right now.
Yeah.
Because when the hammer drops, so many people are going to be hurt by this. So I really want you to pay attention. Take precautions, guys. Like we're showing you what's happening. They're telling us in these leaked videos behind closed doors what they're planning and what's about to happen. You have this knowledge. You have this power now to go out there and make a change for your family. So we're going to talk about that on the show.
Plus, you probably have heard of the devastating earthquake that happened in Syria.
And Turkey.
Just in the last 48 hours. Now, it's nice that world leaders in the West are saying nice words on Twitter. That doesn't help at all as long as there still are in place sanctions of mass destruction. So don't be fooled by the niceties on Twitter. We're going to talk about how the persecution of Syria continues and what we can do about it to actually be helpful.
Yeah. We're also going to talk about vaccines and the unbelievable bombshell about tracking. If you're unvaccinated, the CDC knows about it, and they're actively tracking you. Wait till you hear this bombshell report. We've got the reporter on the show who broke the story. It is unbelievable. So all of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Peter Frowine in our chat says, do not trust the banks. Do not. Yes, Peter's saying it multiple times. Yes. How many of you trust the banks? How many of you trust the banks? And I have a poll up right now in our YouTube chat. can we do polls on Rumble? I have to find out if we can do a poll.
We cannot.
Okay, so Rumble,
Not
you guys.
Yet.
Rumble, you guys got to add the poll in. So on YouTube right now, we have a poll running. We've got about almost 4,000 votes already in. And the question was, how many of you have had issues with your bank lately? Either with withdrawals or missing money. 24% of you have had problems. So that's 24%?
Yeah.
A quarter of you in this poll have had issues either with withdrawals, that's hard to say, or missing money.
Is that ever? Or, I guess.
I said lately.
Oh,
right?
lately.
Lately. Have you had this experience lately? So let us know. Put in your vote right now. We'll kind of check in on that story. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
It's good to have my wife back.
Aw, it's good to be back, you guys.
Not my sister, but my wife.
No, not that.
How do you feel? How do you feel? Do you feel good?
I feel good. Yeah.
Feel awake?
Yeah. So I am a little bit jet lagged, but I was still producing the newsletter. I hope you're subscribed to our newsletter. It's redacted.inc. So I still have been working, even though I was away for my father's retirement party in California. And so a lot of these stories over the last couple of weeks have really just lit my hair on fire, and it was hard to stay away, actually. So as much as I might, bitch and moan about coming to work. I'm fired up to be back. So thank you so much. And thanks to Clayton and you boys for holding down the fort. You did a great job.
Well, the newsletter you mentioned, again, you can subscribe. We publish it every day. It's totally free. And if you go to redacted.inc, not .com, .inc, put in your email address, you'll receive a welcome email from us, and you can read it. It's the perfect way to start your day. You can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes over your cup of coffee. Remember, you'll receive a welcome email. You must verify your email. So many people sign up and they're like, I never got the newsletter. It's because you haven't verified your email. So we'll send you an email, and you just got to click verify. And then tomorrow morning, when we publish tomorrow's Wednesday's newsletter, you'll get it first thing. All right, let's get to the news. Have you noticed recently that not all of your money is in your bank account? Perhaps you've noticed that your direct deposits are having issues. Maybe you got a direct deposit, but all of it's not there. Maybe a portion of it is missing for some reason. Have you experienced this? Let us know. We actually have a poll up right now, and you can drop us a comment below if you're watching us later. You're not alone, though, if you're experiencing this, because, in fact, we here at Redacted have been hearing from a number of you. And as many of you have said now, we've had thousands of people vote in our poll, and they've all been experiencing issues. Turns out you're not alone in this. We're going to have more on exactly what's happening to these bank accounts in just a moment. But first, something big is happening to our money supply. And the banking system is starting to freak out a little bit. They don't say this publicly, but they're starting to freak out. And my question is, are we about to learn that the emperor has no clothes? Like,
I have a question.
Yeah, fire away.
Just to see if it's related, because I just had this recently, never had it happen before. I have an Apple credit card. It's backed by Goldman Sachs. And generally when I make my payment, that money is available instantly. I made a payment this week, and I called them. I was like, this money isn't showing up. They said, yeah, you've got a 10-day hold now on that money. It already came out of my bank, but it is not showing on the Apple card because they said it's going to take 10 days. I'm like, 10 days? So I asked for it to be escalated, and they said they'll escalate it, but it'll take 10 days or so for somebody to respond.
Which is so interesting, because this is one of the main arguments behind going to a Bitcoin type or a blockchain type currency, is that you wouldn't have to go through this ancient infrastructure, that money would be immediately available, although it's a much less efficient transaction. Blockchain transactions take a lot longer than, say, bank-related transactions, but at least there would not. Yeah.
I thought it was the opposite.
No. I think that
the interviews that I've done on blockchain with blockchain technologists say it's instantaneous, and whereas the wire transfers can take
for
hours.
Consumer purchases, they cannot process consumer purchases in the same speed as say
like if you go to the store.
Yes.
Those transactions.
Yes. But say bank to bank, person to person transfer would be much more efficient. So it's interesting that this is proving itself to us before our very eyes.
So, are we looking at the emperor has no clothes here? Or are we, to put it another way, are we learning now that the banks have no money in their vaults and they're ready to take your money instead? Just yesterday, Bank of America issued this alert. Bank of America still forecasting 2023 recession. Fed action not enough. An odd alert, actually, saying that they're forecasting a massive recession for 2023. And they went further to say that the federal government is not doing enough to stop it. What the federal government is doing won't stop it. It's odd that they're putting this out. So just to put a pin in that for a moment, because Bank of America, we'll use that name because Bank of America making this statement. So just remember Bank of America for a moment. But first, really important to provide some context. And for that, we need to go back to the year 2013. Travel with me, if you will, back to the Mediterranean island of Cyprus. In 2013, following the collapse of the housing market in the United States, that calamity flowed to Europe in a domino effect for the small Mediterranean country of Cyprus. Remember this?
Outside the banks, the lines are long, customers worried.
If you don't have cash now, can't do anything.
The banks haven't opened for 7 days, so Cyprus is becoming a cash society, and yet it's hard to get cash.
No accounts, no cards, no nothing.
And so what will they do?
God knows. Suicide.
Increasingly, this is happening.
What happened? There's no money, and I couldn't get any money out, and then my card won't come out.
So not only is there no money, but then you take my card as well. It was particularly devastating. Tourism dried up, unemployment skyrocketed, commercial property prices plummeted 30% in value, and the Cypriot banks had a lot of exposure to local property, which was overvalued. And when the economy collapsed, all these properties lost tons of value. The banks suddenly didn't have collateral to cover the money in these banks. I went to the bank to try to get money out of the bank. Sorry, unavailable, they said. No money. You can't come here. So if the bank had $1 billion of your money or of the people's money, it spent your money on other investments and on loans, loaning out money. So it didn't actually have any of your money in the bank. That was the real secret. That, of course, is the dirty secret of the banking sector, right? It's called fractional reserve banking. And it used to be that they only had to keep 10% of your money in the bank, and they could lend out the rest of it. So the law was 10%. You put in $100, the bank had to keep $10 in the bank. They could lend out the other 90 in a loan, a mortgage to somebody else, right? That's how it works. Then when COVID hit, they scrapped that. No more 10%. Now they could literally give 100% of your money away in form of loans, mortgages. So if you went down to your local bank, hey, is my money in this bank? No, it's not. It's gone. It's literally not here. And if you try to get a deposit or a withdrawal, good luck. They'll tell you to come back another day. That's how it works. So keep none of it in the bank because, you know, we're lending it fully out. The idea was ridiculous, right? Like, why during COVID was this in an effort to try to help the banks? Like, lend out 100% of your money, the average person's money, because we need the banks to be able to be saved, not you.
I'm not sure. So that, well, I mean, it's not like they lowered any lending requirement to civilians or to, customers. What were you going to say, Philip?
I was just going to say, because it was a perfect time when everybody was so distracted with other things that nobody's really going to be paying attention to the fact that the banks are now kind of changing their own rules and Congress is helping them along so that they can make more money.
And we and we accepted all changes as COVID related. Like, oh yeah, world's screwed up. I guess that's what needs to happen.
Right. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Well, not we, but yeah.
Or is this planned obsolescence because they're trying to say, hey, the banking system is screwed. Guess what? We have the solution, a digital federal currency. Let's move to that, and you'll be safe.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps. Yeah, and we'll be able to track and monitor everything. So the money doesn't actually exist. It's not real currency. It doesn't actually exist anywhere. Just, all it is ones and zeros on a Fed balance sheet somewhere. That's all it is. It's not actual currency. So these Cypriot banks in Cyprus suddenly needed help after this run of money. And the European Union said, sorry, we're not going to bail you out. You need to use another tool at your disposal known as a bail-in. Meaning the billions of dollars that you have in your account from random depositors, you can feel free to use that money. You can take the life savings of regular people to cover your debts. When people went to the banks to get their money out, they were told it wasn't available to them. Why? Because the banks took it. Regular working people lost their life savings because it was confiscated by the banking system. The EU would only cover up to 100,000 euro. Just like in the United States, we have the FDIC, which covers a little over $200,000. But what happens if you actually have more money than that in savings? Sorry, that's all up for grabs. They can take it, according to the law. And that's exactly what happened in Cyprus. They took all of that extra money, all of it, billions. In fact, depositors in 2 different Cypriot banks lost billions when the savings were confiscated in order to protect the island's banking system. They took all of it. Again, this is known as a bail-in, not a bail-out. So what is a bail-in? A bail-in is different than a government bailout, where the federal government will swoop in with money to save a failing bank or business. A bail-in uses the money that's already deposited into the accounts to save itself from financial disaster and financial collapse. In other words, it's when the bank steals your money in order to cover its debts. And it's all perfectly legal, by the way. After the 2008-2009 financial collapse, the UK government, for instance, and the European Union and the United States, under the Dodd-Frank Act, added the bail-in as a financial tool to help the banks save themselves. Here's a issue from the Bank of England, executing a bail-in, an operational guide from the Bank of England. How to do it. Here's a handbook. Here's my favorite headline. I love this headline. Why bail-ins will be the new bailouts.
Well, if you think about it, countries from Ireland to Hungary to Argentina have all done this. And according to Andrew Henderson's book, Nomad Capitalist, he says, with over $25 trillion in retirement in the U.S. alone, it's not that far-fetched to assume that your broke government will succumb to the temptation to dip into those retirement funds, especially as we see the national debt ratcheting up with, elevated military budgets. 11 countries and counting have done so in the not so distant past.
I didn't even know it was that many.
So it's not without precedent. 11 countries have just said, we're broke, you're not, we're going to borrow from you.
It's crazy. They literally can just take your money, and this is the new normal now. So in Cyprus, all of these people who were ripped off by the banks went to court to try to get their money back. And here's what happened. The European court just threw it out. Sorry. Dismissing the compensation claim. Sorry, it's legal. They were allowed to take this money. Sorry, under these laws, the banks can just take this money. Doesn't matter. Over the past 24 hours, there have been many reports of banks across Africa taking people's money. When they go to get answers, they're being shut down. No access to ATMs. This is Axis Bank customers trying to use ATMs, but they can't. Which they watch as rich customers inside the bank are walking out with bags of money, but they are not allowed to access the ATMs outside. See the metal bars? I'll show you this. Watch. This is Nigeria.
This is Access Bank at Ifako. While a lot of customers are standing outside to have access to the ATM, the security guards locked the compound, the access to the ATM, took some people inside, collected their ATM cards, and have been giving them money in bulk. Here they are. Look at the people. Those are people they allow in. Those are the people they allow. They allow these people in to give them bulk. They give them access to bulk cash. While their customers are out there, restricted from having access to the ATM. This is GT Bank at Ifako, opposite Zenith Bank. Access Bank, opposite Ifako.
So, just trying to get access to some money, my own money in my own bank, in my own ATM, can't do it. But if you were plugged in and you had access, then you could go inside the bank and they hand you bulk pallets of cash to be able to take home. So that's happening at Access Bank. Here's Zenith Bank. This is also happening. Zenith Bank, customers at Zenith Bank are reporting that money's being stolen from their accounts. And when they take to social media to report it, their tweets are being removed. So Zenith Bank, here's just one example. Zenith Bank is removing the tweets I made. Your bank is cramming people out of their hard-earned money, and you're blaming customers for missing money in your accounts.
Oh, I'm so glad Twitter's on that one. Thank you, Twitter.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know who's if enough bots kind of get onto it and then they cancel out the accounts or something, or there's an algorithm thing where people, jump on it. So they get all these bank people to do it or whatever. Who knows? And in the United States, back to Bank of America, which just issued a big warning about a coming recession in 2023. A recession they're warning the federal government isn't doing enough to stop. Customers of Bank of America recently demanded answers when money went missing from their accounts. Customers started showing up in the lobbies of Bank of America branches demanding to know, hey, where's the money that's supposed to be in my account? It's not there. Or it's less than it should be. What are you guys doing? Before they arrived, they were told to call customer service. So they got on the phone with customer service, and customer service didn't help them at all. So they came down to the bank branches and they're showing up. And there's long lines of people waiting to get answers about what's going on with their money. So, and they don't want you to do this. Of course, the banks don't want you to come to them physically anymore. Banks have moved mostly digitally. In fact, if certain bank accounts that you have will actually penalize you for going to the teller. They want you just to use the digital banking services because they don't want to have an interaction with you. Here's just one example of people showing up demanding their money at Bank of America. Watch.
So I'm at Bank of America and everybody's missing money. I'm also missing money over $1,300 and they're telling me to call customer service. And they keep hanging up on people. This another person here is also missing money. So we're trying to see what's going on. Money's missing today and we need our money. And they're already telling us to call customer service. and customer service ain't doing nothing about it. So just a heads up, if anybody's experiencing this, please let us know, because this is not right. I'm missing $1,400 from my account, and they're telling me that there's no way they can help us. This guy's missing money too. This other person is missing money too. And you missing money too? There you go. So this is not something that's just one person. This is everybody's happening to them. And this is crazy. This is very crazy. Yes, Bank of America decided to take people's money without their consent. And we're asking what's going on, and they're giving us a runaround. Everybody for the same thing, man. Same thing.
See someone in the chat saying, "Hail Hydra." Frightening.
Yeah.
We're also hearing reports of this happening to customers at Wells Fargo and Chase Bank. Let us know in the chat what bank you have and where you're experiencing this. So far, in this poll we have up here during our live stream, almost 7,000 of you have now voted, 6,500 of you, and 25% of you have said you've either had issues with your bank lately with withdrawals or missing money. They don't want you to know about this. So some of you might say, well, my money's protected because of FDIC, right? Federal Deposit Insurance Commission. Now, if you're in the European Union, it's the European Central Bank, the ECB. So the FDIC is supposed to insure over $200,000 for Americans. So no matter what happens, right, the idea is that the FDIC has your back. $200,000, good. Anything above that, though, that's risky, right? That could be lost. We don't know. But we will make sure that we would get money out to you, $200,000. That's insured by the FDIC. In Europe, it's 100,000 euros, thanks to the European Central Bank. But not so fast. And this, folks, perhaps is the real story here, the deep part of this story. Because what happens when the FDIC and the ECB suddenly don't have enough money to cover those people that want their money in cash? Like, oh, I'm troubled by what's going on. I'm going to go to the bank and get my money, but it's not there. What happens? Oh, the bank used it and sold it or did something ridiculous with my investments. Okay, well, at least the FDIC will take care of me. Where's my money? I want my insurance. Sorry. So the real story here is that the FDIC only has $200 billion in assets on hand to insure over $9 trillion. How does that math work? $200 billion to cover $9 trillion.
Well, okay, but if they say that only 4% of currency actually exists in physical form, then I don't know what I did do that math off the top of your head.
Well, that means 1.6%. 1.6% of all transactions are covered or insured under this math. Right. 200 billion out of 9 trillion means that like 1.63% is covered under the FDIC. Like if everyone decided, hey, I'm sick of this, I'm scared about this, I'm going to the bank because I want my own money.
No, it's absolutely not possible. But, you know, we had been, well, even before this change in currency rules based on fractional reserve, we knew that less than 4% of all money in the economy existed in paper form.
Right.
That 96% or more of our currency is based on a belief system of binary codes in a computer. So we already knew that. But now it's probably, I mean, that percentage seems even lower. I'm not going to do that off the top of my head to embarrass myself. But, you know, yes, this is like reinforcing existing beliefs. It's a scary belief system when we're at the mercy of people who we don't necessarily trust.
So the bottom line is it's a house of cards. And so now we have our first stunning piece of video from the FDIC and a stunning meeting that they held in November that they don't want you to see. So it just leaked. And this video is out. You're going to see members of the FDIC and other panel discussions in this FDIC meeting. It's not just FDIC members. It's lawyers, it's bankers, but they're all around a table having a meeting admitting that a crash is coming. They're saying this. And they're also saying publicly in this meeting, and they all kind of laugh about it, that they don't have any faith in the banks. They also admit on camera that they don't want you to know this because only people who need to know that it's coming should be notified, i.e. the wealthy. They don't want you to know about this. And they say it in this meeting. You common people shouldn't be told because you would take your money out of the banks and then they wouldn't be able to use your money for bail-in purposes to save the banks. We'll let the rich people know about this, just like in March 2020. They made moves because we alerted them. They sold their stocks. They were in the know. They were fine. And you got screwed. And they're saying this in this meeting. This is the FDIC meeting. I'm going to show you a couple of different sound bites here. This is amazing. Watch.
Should be accessible when people need to know, but I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim. Right? I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do.
You hearing them laughing?
They're laughing. That's really stinking condescending. What I hear from that is like, run along, little girl.
Yeah.
You don't need to know. And also, ever heard of FTX? Because, yeah, we don't like that. When we realize that people are doing stuff with our money that's untowards. Turns out not a great idea.
So we don't have faith in the banking system in here, and they all laugh. They're like, yeah, none of us do. We're the FDIC.
We can't tell the little people what's really going on here. It will just scare them, and their little brains can't handle it.
Because if they do, oh my God, they might panic, and they might actually want their own money that they worked 40 years of their lives for.
We want them to have full faith and confidence in the banking system. They know the FDIC insurance is there. They know it works. They put their money in. They're going to get their money out. So there's a select crowd of people that are in the institutional side. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand this. There's a bunch of law firms represented in this room. There's a bunch of people that charge them by the hour a lot of money to explain this all to them. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And they all have huge staffs. But I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out in the general public.
I wondered whether there are some market tests of whether you're being heard.
So
there's no adult in that room. Like, yeah, that's fine.
I think about
anybody there who's like, maybe that's a little unethical. Should we have lunch on that? Should we think about that for a minute?
No, because they keep going. And that's just the first little chunk of this. So you're too stupid. We don't want you to know, the average person to know about this. If you're wealthy and you're plugged in, you've got a large legal team and you can pay people by the hour to figure all this stuff out. Yeah, you can figure it out.
I mean,
the average person
kind of has a point.
He does have a point. The system is rigged.
Because like when they announced there was a pandemic, a viral infection, toilet paper was like impossible to get. There was a run on toilet paper. So I get that the fact that there would be a run on the banks, and it could devastate the banks.
It will,
because people, yeah, totally,
because of the way that they're structured.
Exactly.
It's a scam. It's a scam. And the great house of cards is going to come down. When the collapse comes, the FDIC admits that they will send out an announcement. So get ready for this. They admit they will send out an announcement and they will tell us not to use money. This is how that's going to go down. They tell us that they plan on telling us on a Friday night. See if you can guess why they would tell us on a Friday night that the banking system has collapsed. Don't worry, don't use any money. We'll figure this out and we'll take care of you or not. We'll tell you on a Friday night. Listen to her explain when this will happen. Watch.
How would we use targeted guarantees to allay concerns about excess cash use? There's a lot of questions here. And so, there are a lot of things we've been thinking about, and what we want to hear from you today is what you think the priorities would be in order to go about setting expectations appropriately in public about how we would execute Title II, so that if and when we do have to have that announcement on Friday night, ideally Friday night, that people are in a position to receive it, understand it, and say, yeah, that works. And we can see how this will happen. Of course, there will be doubters, but there's a lot of things going on.
Okay, thanks for that.
So Friday night, of course, in the banking system is closed. So people all weekend can just be at home freaking out because, oh, wait a minute, I just lost. What's going to happen with my money?
Yeah.
My bank's going, we're in this economic, what the hell are you going to do about my money? It's gone. They're admitting this is coming. And they're saying that they managed to pull their money to safety. The rich people will pull their money to safety ahead of time. But most people were totally screwed because they weren't in the know. This is what happened in 2020, right? Those people got screwed because they weren't in the room where it happened. They weren't Bill Gates. They didn't get the heads up, the phone call from Nancy Pelosi. Here is how he actually admits that some people will be screwed by this. Watch.
Spread should respond to good and bad news about the institutions, and it's really important. I mean, it's a little bit conflicted, right? I mean, it's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they're going to be. And it could be an early warning signal to the FDIC and the primary regulators when these things happen. And there may be some other prices. This is similar to what Jay was saying in the market, that you can tell whether people understand who's going to be protected, who isn't going to be protected. It would be, I think, an interesting study to look at the evolution of market prices in a situation like March of 2020, for example, and see whether people understood what might happen.
I might go further than that, Don, because I think that...
So listen to this next guy. This is unbelievable. So this guy just admitted, like, that most people didn't understand because they weren't educated about it. The people that were in the know managed to be okay. The people that got screwed because they weren't in the... we wouldn't give them information. Listen, though, to the next guy.
You look at the evolution. I think we have to sit down and talk to long-term debt investors and make sure that they, as a stakeholder group, fully understand bank debt today is not what it was before. It is not principal protected by design. And I think that expectation, I like how you started off, Betsy, like it's all about expectation setting. And I think that is absolutely critical. If that doesn't hold, this whole thing doesn't hold. And so I think it's one area to focus on.
So if the expectation doesn't hold, then this whole phony house of cards collapses, is basically what he's saying. Did I read that wrong? If the expectation doesn't hold, the expectation that our banking system is fine,
meaning we need to maintain the ruse.
Yes, we need to maintain the facade, is what he's saying.
Okay.
And not just him. We heard that 4 or 5 times around that table. The same thing was said multiple times about the facade, the phoniness of it all.
Yeah.
The house of cards of it all. So journalist Greg...
if you want... sorry, I was just going to say, like, while we're still on that point, if you want, like, a really good example of just absolute evil, like if you believe that absolute evil exists on the planet, you were just looking at a meeting of it. Because that is just, I mean, it's just like how just almost like flippant and nonchalant they are about, like, yeah, a lot of common people are going to get screwed, but as long as the people that need to know can get their money out so we can secure, the rich so that they're fine, then everybody else is an acceptable loss.
Right. Yes,
how do you make that decision?
Yes, when he said, well, a lot of people get hurt, let's do a market study to figure out which of those people
understood it.
The callous, which of those people will get hurt.
Oh, right.
Like,
right.
Yeah. Some of them will get hurt. That's okay. Acceptable loss. Let's do a market study just so we know exactly who. Meaning, you have already made that deal with the devil.
Well, and also to Philip's point, the idea that these people are sitting there waiting for these things to unfold and they're going to see that the rich people will be fine. And he brings up the point throughout the meeting where we've got to try to basically convince these rich people just to keep in the system. It's kind of like the Bernie Madoff story again, right? Mm-hmm. Bernie Madoff trying to convince his biggest investors
not to withdraw.
Like if he can keep those 4 or 5 big guys in the game, then he can support this house of cards. And they make mention of this throughout the meeting, that if we've got to keep the big players.
Yeah.
Really? Who's going to stick around for that?
Yeah.
When the music stops, will they be standing there? It certainly didn't happen for Bernie Madoff.
Isn't it, Philip? It's like it looks like a Simpsons sketch. All of these,
like Mr. Burns.
Old powerful people.
You can find this in You can find this in any like Marvel comic for when you got like the meeting of the villains. You go back to the very beginning, and every meeting of villains looks and sounds just like this. Because they're never like trying to like actually like literally destroy the world. They're always doing something like this, some nefarious like this is how we like enslave the entire population to our will. And you're just watching it, and people are just like, hey, no, this is cool. This is fine.
So, it's crazy. So journalist Greg Reese just reported that he has a source at the European Central Bank who was just assigned an urgent project related to bail-in capability, meaning how the Europeans will begin to structure bail-ins. Like, this is happening, folks. and he's been pulled into an urgent meeting, the European Central Bank. So the ECB, Reese said that his source for the new ECB project goal is to build a data infrastructure for the financial market infrastructures, which are the networks that allow financial transactions to take place to report the ECB about the capability of banks and capital markets, to absorb losses and then to execute bail-ins, he says, as quickly and efficiently as possible. So identify and then immediately target and push those bail-ins to take people's capital. Basically, so it won't create these ripple effects. We'll just steal these people's money over here in order to offset what's going on over here. This urgent project makes clear that the ECB is expecting a system collapse, he says, and that they know it is uncontrollable and unforeseeable. So bottom line, the banks don't have your money. If you want to go and get your money, good luck. If you think the FDIC and the ECB insurance will cover your money, you're wrong. Here they are actively admitting and telling you the truth about this. So when this house of cards will come crashing down, I think really important, bottom line, to protect your family outside of this system.
Yeah.
And this is why I talk about get cash out. Get cash out. If anytime you have the opportunity when you're at an ATM or other, take as much as you can to have.
When I was traveling, I checked our bank statement because we were apart. And I looked in and I said, honey, what's going on? Why do you keep taking cash out? Do you have a gambling problem that I don't know about? And he was like, I told you we need to be
pay attention.
Now that we've said that, pay attention. So if anyone sees you in the street, they're going to be like, hey, guy.
Well, I don't keep it on me. I make sure it's safe in appropriate places. But, like in safety deposits and stuff like that, you've got to make sure you've got proper places. But the bottom line is, again, that's why we're seeing this crypto. I think, we're seeing crypto jumping up over the past couple of weeks again. Gold, silver prices, making sure that you've got money in precious metals and other assets, things that you control, as well as having cash on hand.
If I may, I'd love to recommend an awesome book about the history of currency called Layered Money by Nick Bhatia. I found this so fascinating, this book. I read it about a year and a half ago. And he does make the point that every government currency has failed because governments cannot resist the urge to enrich themselves through currency. And in fact, there was never any reason for governments to be involved in currency, period. The Roman Caesars did it just for branding, basically to put their faces on it, and then they could not resist pulling metals out of the standardized coin so that a nickel had less nickel, and that enriched the government. So this is not new to society. We can collectively survive it, but we should absolutely understand it in historical context.
A lot of people asking in the chat, when is this crash coming? Who knows if anyone had a crystal ball on that exactly. All I'm saying is to be prepared. Put things in place now where you can actually take, here's the thing, if you've got $5,000 in a bank account in a bank, maybe you consider doing something with it that you control. Maybe putting it into precious metals that that is outside of this system and is held in a vault. Plenty of companies that do that, where you can have, hold vaults in Singapore, in Switzerland, and other places where they have it in a highly secured vault. You have access and ownership at any time to go and visit your coins or whatever, your gold, silver, or keeping it in a home safe. I know a lot of people who have home safes, large home safes that are like the size of a wall. Like having something like that in place where you keep this on hand yourself, or keeping capital in your pockets as well and keeping that cash as well. So Catherine Austin Fitts is a big proponent of cash. And I know there's been a lot of texts, well, cash is worthless. Cash is worthless. If the government collapses, that's a different scenario.
Yeah.
But the cash will still be worth something, absolutely, if it's available. Think about how important cash would be if people can't go to the ATM and get it out anymore.
Right.
And you're the one that actually did have it ahead of time.
And a lot of the preppers, they collect alcohol too. Yes. That's also another thing that...
Yeah, I was gonna say, start investing in whiskey and cigarettes, because those are things that people will barter for.
Well, as Catherine Austin Fitts talks about, the number one currency after the fall of the Soviet Union was not money or rubles or whatever, it was vodka. Yeah. And it was the little travel-sized things of vodka for crossing borders, things like that. You'd pay people off with vodka. So it becomes incredibly valuable. And so Catherine Austin Fitts says anytime you go to the grocery store, buy just a bottle of whiskey or buy something, not that you're going to drink, but that you would use later as barter. I'm telling you, she's a smart cookie. And this is not me saying this. I'm listening to smarter people, much smarter than me. And you look at history, what happened to the Soviet Union and others, and this is history will repeat itself over and over and over again. And if you don't pay attention to it, you're going to be screwed. So please protect yourself on this.
All right. We are going to tell you about one of our show sponsors that deals in this very space before we move on talking about Syria, because this is another way to have an alternate banking system that is not based on these baddies we just talked about, because we've been brainwashed into believing that the only way to grow our money for retirement is to risk it in the stock market, which basically you're partnering with the government in a big bank that is also partnered with the government. This is just not true. You absolutely can reach your financial goals and dreams without taking unnecessary risks. Do you really control your retirement money? Well, not if it's in one of those big banks. If you've got a 401k or an IRA or similar retirement plan, the government controls it. They decide how much you can borrow and when you must pay it back, and you owe taxes and penalties for taking money out for too long or waiting too long, even though it's your money. And thanks to our skyrocketing national debt and a Congress that continues to spend like a drunken sailor, who knows how much you'll have in taxes during that retirement that could last 30 years. So you're in control. You get to access your money for any purpose with Bank on Yourself. There's no guesswork. Both your principal and your growth are locked in. Plus, you have a tax-free retirement, and you know what your tax will be. Your tax rate will be in retirement. It will be zero under current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. It's built-in inflation protection. Your money is guaranteed to grow by a larger dollar amount every year, in both good and bad times. Plus, again, the peace of mind, knowing that you are no longer dependent on these big banks and these people who make decisions based on whether or not they think you're worthy of being protected. So get a free report with all the details at bankonyourself.com/redacted. Once again, that's bankonyourself.com/redacted.
All right, we've got more news to get to here on this Tuesday. So a lot of moving pieces there on that banking system. We're going to keep our eyes around the world on that, whether it's in Africa, Europe, or America. We're also watching what's going on in Syria and Turkey, and of course the horrible earthquake situation there that's unfolded over the past 48 hours. But it's more about the geopolitics around that event that we want to talk about. Plus, if you go to get a blood donation, or want to offer your blood up at Red Cross, they're going to give you some new gender options. This is a crazy story, so we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about Syria.
All right. Well, a major earthquake in Syria and Turkey has claimed over 5,000 lives, and the death toll is rising. But here is the thing that I am weary of seeing already in just the first 24 hours is virtue signaling about campaign donations or donations towards the Syrian people, unless they are coupled with a demand for the West to lift sanctions against Syria so that the country can actually recover. We can say nice things on Twitter. Justin Trudeau has committed some aid and said he's very sad and devastated about the earthquakes that have devastated everyone's loved ones, and Canada stands ready to provide assistance. Well, that's so nice, but Canada supported terrorism in Syria and devastating sanctions. So this is a good time to remind you that the U.S. and Canada and their Western partners has imposed what many call sanctions of mass destruction on Syria for decades. Now, last week we spoke at length about why. Why does the West attack Syria so acutely? We discussed that, when we discussed the United Nations sort of BS report about chemical weapons attacks, I refer you to that piece. To sum up, the U.S. does not want secular Arab nationalism to take hold in those regions, and they want U.S. interests to profit from the business in the Middle East. And Syria's leaders want Arab independence. Those are conflicting goals. That's why these sanctions are still crippling the Syrian economy and will continue to do so no matter how hard the region tries to recover from this devastation. Now, in December of 2003, George Bush sanctioned Syria unless they withdrew support for Hezbollah and Palestinians. The sanctions include bans on exports of military equipment and civilian goods that could be used for military equipment. So basically everything. And it also included a ban on U.S. exports to Syria other than food and medicine. Now, Stephen Goins is a reporter who's done a lot of work in this region. His book, Washington's Long War on Syria, just lays out exactly how devastating these have been. These sanctions against Syria. In October 2011, the New York Times reported that the Syrian economy was buckling under the pressure of sanctions by the West. By the spring of 2012, sanctions-induced financial hemorrhaging had forced Syrian officials to stop providing education, healthcare, and other essential services in some parts of the country. By 2016, U.S. and EU economic sanctions on Syria were causing huge suffering among ordinary Syrians and preventing the delivery of humanitarian aid, according to a leaked UN internal report. The report revealed that aid agencies were unable to obtain drugs and equipment for hospitals because of sanctions, preventing foreign firms from conducting commerce with Syria. The sanctions resembled the economic warfare that Washington had waged on Arab nationalist Iraq in the 90s. Those sanctions, as we've seen, destroyed the golden age the Arab nationalists had brought to the country. Patrick Cockburn wrote that the U.S. and EU sanctions resembled the Iraqi sanction regime and were an economic siege on Syria. Well, that continues. And in fact, when the same thing happened in Iraq, and we knew that those sanctions of mass destruction were killing people, at the time, U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright said that those dead Iraqis were worth it.
Yeah, that was fine. We looked at the numbers and we thought, all those dead Iraqi children, it was worth it.
Right.
Those were Madeleine Albright's words. And then they celebrated her at her funeral. They had a big, celebration. Bill Clinton arrived, Barack Obama. All the warmongers show up.
Basically she's saying, these people's lives, brown lives, were worth it to stop secular Arab nationalism, which we don't want because we have conflicting financial interests.
Right. Yeah. If they are self-sufficient, if they have their own means through oil, and they are taken care of, that is an affront to us in the West.
And as Stephen Goins, writer of this book I just shared, points out, it's easy for us to say because no U.S. citizen or Wall Street banker ever lost their life from these sanctions, period. Now, Aaron Monte is a journalist who specializes on Syria, and he pointed this out on Twitter. In 2019, senior U.S. official Dana Stroul bragged that the U.S. was destroying Syria's economy as a means to an end. Listen.
The rest of Syria, though, is rubble. And what the Russians want and what Assad wants is economic reconstruction. And that is something that the United States can basically hold a card on via the international financial institutions and our cooperation with the Europeans. So we argued that absent behavioral changes by the Assad regime, we should hold the line on preventing reconstruction aid and technical expertise from going back into Syria.
Okay.
Can you believe that?
So I'm going to hold this as a pawn, as a card. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's what really frustrates me is how people, they don't understand that sanctions also kill people. So it's like when they say, we're just going to put sanctions on them, it's almost like they're like, don't worry, we're not going to put boots on the ground. We're only going to sanction them. But if you look at how many people die from that, what's the difference?
Well, I mean, as Vanessa Beeley reports, look, the sanctions are crushing. So they can't get oil, they can't get gas. To fill and get some petrol for their cars costs hundreds of dollars, and they only make about $27 a month. So these sanctions literally are killing people where they can't heat their homes.
Well, at this point now, think about the medical supplies that they need that will be sanctioned.
Right.
Go ahead, David, please.
I was just saying it's actually more inhumane than actual boots on the ground. If you think about it, because you're basically starving somebody of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it really is reminiscent of what somebody said earlier, like a siege on Syria. And it's like a classic medieval castle siege. And what you didn't go into the castle and kill everybody in it. What you did was you surrounded the castle and then let them starve to death.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's exactly what these sanctions are. They are just a modernized version of the classic castle siege.
That is actually how the Portuguese,
Yeah, they cut them off. You cut off all their food supplies. They all get disease. Like all sorts of horrible diseases break out inside the castle walls.
That's how the Portuguese seized Lisbon from the Moors, is they closed them in the summer. And it was hot and it was a drought.
Yeah.
And then they could.
They just waited and waited. And then they're like, okay, we'll take our castle back now.
Yeah. Now, Justin Trudeau just today says that the Canadian government will provide $10 million in immediate aid to the people of Turkey and Syria and continue to provide support as the situation evolves. I would be very interested in tracking that money, given that the sanctions are still in place. Journalist Eva Bartlett says, we all know by now that any assistance, she's Canadian, and also specializes in this region. She says any assistance that the government of Canada provides will go to terrorists in Idlib, not Syrian civilians, especially considering that the West supports al-Nusra, which is in the conflict between the Assad regime and
I would say the Assad government.
The Assad government, okay.
We call them in the West the regime. We want the Assad
Let's use
regime.
Administration,
because it's been so implanted in people's heads that it just flows off our tongues sometimes. I catch myself saying it too, the Assad regime. It's like, wait a minute.
Because
is it the Biden regime?
Sure, yes.
Right? I mean, so
it is.
It's the Assad government.
Okay, sure.
Let's call it the Assad government.
Okay, in the fight between the al-Nusra, which is the religious faction that wants to implement harsh Islamic law in this region, and has been uprising against the government there. The United States supports them, and al-Nusra is actually a faction of al-Qaeda or ISIS. And so, yes, Canada and the United States do absolutely support terrorism in Syria. And so, it would be interesting to see how much of this aid that Western politicians give lip service to will actually reach anybody who needs it, which again is why I'm going to get really irritated if I see people on, Twitter saying, oh my God, my heart, here's a GoFundMe page. Like, do you know if it will get there? How about what we should be saying right now as Westerners is lift these sanctions so that we actually can help people in this region if that is our goal. So Russia is doing that, though. Right now, they are not going to wait around for sanctions to lift. Here are some images, videos of the Russian Foreign Ministry. They sent this out on their Telegraph channel, that they are sending emergency aid workers to this region immediately because they're kind of sanctions buddies, Right. Russia's sanctioned, Syria's sanctioned. Well, they can work together. And
so they show up immediately to help. Well, here we go with cadaver dogs and search dogs trying to help and get people out of this rubble. Go ahead.
I was thinking earlier, like, imagine if all the sanctioned countries would unite. Like, we would be screwed.
Yeah.
I feel like that slowly is happening.
Look at the BRICS nations. Yeah, just look at what's happening, right? And the problem is that unless you are of a certain level of means, like Russia, that you are almost self-sufficient, it's very difficult. I mean, Africa has just been under constant sanctions and control by the West. And so it's almost impossible if you don't have the wherewithal, the industrial capacity to get up to speed, to get oil and gas, to actually start the fossil fuel development, to have your own industrial revolution, you're under their thumb. That's exactly what's happening here. So people in the chat were like, what? We've been funding Al-Qaeda? Yeah, we have. We've been doing this for years. And this is like the Washington Post in 2015, talking about the CIA effort in Syria with large funding cuts, billions of dollars that we were funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda rebels.
This really ramped up during the Obama administration, when the Obama administration wanted to call out the Assad government as a regime and supported a government uprising. Now, the Assad regime did fight back, as most governments do, against any uprising, and the United States and Western allies took a side against the religious extremists, al-Nusra, which do have a direct connection to Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, of course. And
they are the
what's
franchise.
Amazing is that the money and the weapons that we've funneled into Syria, into the hands of Al-Qaeda, have now wound up on the battlefield in Ukraine. Like these very same Syrian Al-Qaeda operatives that we've funneled and funded for years are fighting in Ukraine on the part of the Ukrainian army side. So yes, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, these guys we've been absolutely keeping in business for many, many years.
Now, the U.S. is in Syria, too. They already were there illegally because the Syrian government absolutely does not want them in that region. And again, as Aaron Mate points out, the U.S. military occupies 1/3 of Syria. I didn't realize it was that big. Stealing its oil and wheat, combined with the U.S. sanctions, this military occupation deprives Syria of the fuel it needs to power vehicles and machines. Meaning, like, how can you clean stuff up without vehicles? How can you run ambulances, right? How can you run a hospital? This, he points out, will make it even more difficult to rescue people trapped under the rubble. So my take on this, I do very much recommend this book, Washington's Long War on Syria, because I think this puts into relief the fact that these crushing sanctions have been in place. There is no point saying nice words on Twitter about helping if you do not support lifting of these sanctions and getting out of Syria. Maybe you can do better by asking your local politician to stop this rather than sending a GoFundMe that you're not at all guaranteed will make its way through these sanctions.
Right. Like, that's great that you're putting out a press release. We stand with the Syrian people and the Turkish people. But actually, hey, why don't you stop and actually vote against sanctions and remove the sanctions that are crippling and crushing these people? Smart idea. I love that. We've got more news to get to.
I would like to argue. I would like to argue real quick against, like, Aaron Mate, where he says that the U.S. military is stealing the oil in Syria. When you look at the footage, I know we played it like several or like a year ago or so. But we've been covering as we've been covering this. But we're there protecting their oil.
Oh, yes.
And we're making sure it goes to people that know how to use it and what to properly do with it, which just happens to be us. But if it wasn't just us, we're just there protecting it. That's all we're doing. Yeah. We're not stealing.
We're just guarding it, protecting it, because you don't know how to use your own oil. So we invade your country, we block it off, cordon it off, and then we steal it and send it back to the United States.
Well, contrary to most belief, Syria is not an oil-rich place compared to most Middle Eastern countries, but it is centrally located in a place where they do not want unification of oil-producing countries in this region.
Well, we've got more news to get to. We've got a lot to get to here on this Tuesday, on this Taco Tuesday. We're going to talk about the Red Cross and how they've gone woke. How could blood donations go woke? But they have. We're also going to be talking about tracking the unvaccinated. You do not want to miss these stories. We were joined by two special guests, two really brave souls who are going to be joining us. One, a reporter who broke a story of the unvaccinated being tracked by the CDC. Patrick Halley is going to be joining us from the National File with this story. This is a bombshell story. It's in a database and actually actively tracking anybody who's unvaccinated or didn't get the full dosage of vaccinations. And we only learned about this through some secret tapes that were just released. We're also going to be joined by a professor from MIT who has a very special message about those mRNA vaccines. His video has gone viral, and we're going to have him on the show in just a few moments as well to talk about that. But first, my notes are missing.
It's there. It's all there, honey.
So we got to talk about this because, look, if you are getting a little older, your body's changing a little bit. Like today, I was doing some stretches and I'm like, I'm getting creaky. Creaky. Like, what's going on here? Maybe you're getting a little, a bit of that dad bod. I'm sure, people watching right now maybe have that little extra pounds, that 15 extra pounds, feeling a little less like your old self. You don't have time to work out, but you wanted the energy in the body that you once had. Well, that's where Nugenix comes in, because it'll help you feel revived, working out like you used to, like you're younger. It's the number one selling, it's the number one selling testosterone supplement at GNC. It's the number one selling testosterone booster at GNC. Nugenix Total T can help re-energize your life, help you get back the powerful, confident, good-looking warrior you used to be. If you want more energy to counter the negative physical effects of aging, Nugenix Total T testosterone booster with Testofen will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, and help you look and feel like the man you really want to be. So Nugenix Total T boosts the essential free and total testosterone levels that the aging process robs you of. You're going to feel stronger. Now, every product professes quality, but many other products use generic ingredients. Nugenix Total T uses the clinical potency levels that they're used in the trials. So their formulation is backed by 10 years of science and research. Again, really fantastic to help you re-energize your life. And right now, you're going to get a free bottle of Nugenix Thermo, which is their most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help get back into shape. You're going to get this absolutely free. All you have to do to get your complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T is when you text 231-231, it's right there on your screen, text the word redacted to 231-231. You get a bottle of their Nugenix Thermo, their fat incinerator, And again, you get that for free. So if you text 231-231 and enter the keyword redacted, please do that. 231-231. You'll get that complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T as well. So just give them a try. Here's the disclaimer. Texting enrolls you into recurring automated messages. Consent not required to purchase messages, and data rates may apply. I always laugh at that because at this point, many, many years after cell phones, like we all know that message and data rates apply. But you got to put it in there. You got to mention that. So check them out. Thanks to Nugenix for supporting independent journalism and what we do here on this show. By the way, if you do subscribe to the old channel, your big name will pop up here on the big board, on the big screen. So please subscribe. If you're not already a subscriber, we're live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So you can subscribe right there. Your name will pop up on the big board if you'd like to join the rebellion. All right, let's talk about now the American Red Cross.
All right, this is an interesting story. By interesting, I'm going to let you fill in the blanks. The American Red Cross will now let donors self-declare their sex for blood donations. So if you are a biological male and you want to go in and give a donation, you can self-declare as a woman, no questions asked, and vice versa. Now, why is a big question, and we're going to try and get to the bottom of this. Here is the American Red Cross website explaining this policy, saying, we understand that there's a difference between biological sex and gender. The FDA has this guidance document, which we'll talk about in a second, that says, in the context of the donor history questionnaire, the FDA recommends that male or female gender be taken to self-identified and self-reported, meaning no need for your medical history, what chromosomes you have. You can self-report. Now, I'm confused by this because they're prioritizing ideology over biology in something that is kind of scientific.
Yeah,
right?
You think? Like,
blood matching.
Blood matching, and hey, my estrogen levels are higher because I'm a woman.
Right.
Well, I was going to ask, does it matter, if you have postpartum or prepartum blood, a man getting that, isn't it different? Won't there be things like that matter?
Yeah, blood type, I think, in this category matters a lot. And I know that a lot of this blood is tested for certain things before it's used for donation purposes. But the reason this matters more than anything else, and I do want to talk about the hormones in trans-identifying people later because that's what this is aimed at. But at first blush, the Red Cross is saying that right now the policy is that they do not accept blood from male homosexuals unless they have abstained from male-to-male sex for 3 months, at least 3 months. And this has long been their policy based on guidance from the FDA. And the reason being is that the FDA currently identifies that there are 2 risk factors for HIV infection. They are 1, having sex with someone who is HIV positive, and 2, male-to-male sexual encounters. This is based on just, the identified risk factors, the current data available. Now, some have considered this homophobic for a long time, but the FDA is saying this calculation remains. We can't deny that these 2 things exist as risk factors. The Red Cross now is saying that based on this, we are sorry if this is hurtful. Here's what they say, that based on this data, we still have to say that we have to defer for 3 months the most recent sexual contact, a man who has sex with another man in the past 3 months, that that's the guideline for accepting their blood. And the Red Cross recognizes the hurt this policy has caused many. I want to put a pin on that because who feels hurt by the fact that you can't donate blood, that this is discriminatory? And this idea of hurt as a physiological construct, that it's hurting me and it's causing me some kind of distress that I, as a human being, cannot supersede. I'm not strong enough to overcome this pain of not being able to give blood because of certain risk factors of disease.
Right.
I'm reading a book
That's
right now
getting pissed
called
off if they're like, you're allergic to penicillin, so you don't tell me to take penicillin because that hurts my feelings because I'm allergic to it.
Possibly, yeah. These are risk factors, and this is what we identify as a risk factor. And should that hurt your feelings that this is a risk factor. I'm reading a book right now called The Coddling of the American Mind. And it talks about how since the 80s, we've expanded these terms that used to refer to like bodily pain, like trauma and pain, to psychological things. And that is making us more and more unable to handle situations in life that we as humans should be able to handle. So by saying like, I'm sorry you're a gay man, and that this is an identified risk factor for HIV, so I won't be able to accept your blood donation. And I'm sorry that this is so hurtful and you may not get over this.
Right.
And you're too fragile to, deal with the psychological pain of not being able to give blood in
Like
this
you're
time.
going to go, I went to try to give blood today and I'm so hurt that there is science to back up why they won't take my blood.
I mean, wouldn't you hope that your homosexual friend would be a lot more emotionally resilient than that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But what about if you're presenting as a male and you had sex with a person presenting as a male? Is that the same thing?
Yes, you are right exactly why this is a problem. Because now they are saying that we cannot accept male homosexuals who are sexually active. We cannot accept their blood. But if you come in and you tell me you're a woman, I can accept your blood. They are basically encouraging you to change gender in order to get around the rules that they cannot change based on the risk factor.
This is like this is like the men in Scotland who are like, yeah, I killed that person. I don't want to go to the all-male prison or I'll be destroyed. I'm going to go to the female prison. So I'm switching my gender today. I'm now a woman.
Yes. In other words, we have to screen out homosexuals. But if you're not a male, no questions asked. Official policy. Here is the section on their website about transgender donors saying, yes, in this context, this is the FDA guidance. This change now allows blood donors to register with the gender in which they identify. The Red Cross will no longer ask donors to answer both male and female questions when attempting to donate. There is no deferral associated with being transgender, and eligibility will be based upon the criteria with the gender the donor has reported, which is interesting because there are certain biological markers that you have to meet when you donate. So if I go in and I say I'm a woman, then I have to be under a certain height, weight, BMI, that kind of thing, right? I guess that goes out the window because if I tell you I'm a man, then I don't have to meet that criteria. So they're also lifting this safety parameter. This is a baffling rejection of human biology, especially when you consider that the CDC's own data, take a look at this, shows that 4 out of 10 trans-identified males living in urban centers are HIV positive. So they're saying, I guess, I don't know, like so many questions, right? Are they now, they're no longer concerned about HIV blood? What are your rights as a blood recipient? Why would someone who is altering their biology so aggressively with hormones and then want to donate blood, is there a concern about that? So all of these questions, right? Go ahead, David. What is your question?
Well, I was just going to say, you're basically opening up the ability for trans people to go after TERFs with their blood. You know what? I got this, but now that I don't have to do this, I'm going to go donate my blood and hope TERFs get it.
Well, they are supposed to screen. That's why you give so much, is because I think almost half of it is screened for disease. But at the same time,
and also vaccines. Is that going to be?
Well, Red Cross already had their issues, and that's what I was going to say. But I'm kind of being careful here. But Red Cross had their controversy about that. They're like, we're not looking at the difference between, hey, did you get a vaccine or not? Blood is blood to them. But to other people, it might not be. And now we know, of course, the problems with that. So Red Cross is like, well, we're not sifting through that. You got a vaccine or you didn't. It really doesn't matter to us. We'll take your blood.
Now, ideologically speaking, I do think that lesbian and gay people and binary and bisexual people want a divorce from the trans community. These two groups are not ideologically aligned. So I don't think that a true male homosexual would say, oh, I'm going to get around these rules by just saying I'm a trans person so that I can donate. So this does very much seem Well, one, like they are encouraging male homosexuals to do this, and two, like it is just another sort of woke written rule in order to show that they are supportive of trans rights. And I find it very confusing and concerning, especially because this is a medical and scientific process, and medicine and science should matter.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's probably something that's already hard to convince people to do. And now you're just going to make it even harder, where people don't even want to try to help people anymore because they're scared of what kind of blood they're going to get.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing that happened when people are like worried about they're going to get in trouble for helping people with CPR, right? You know, like being a good Samaritan, like giving someone CPR or helping them, you know, it's like.
Or helping girls with weights at the gym.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about.
You need a spot? No, get out of here, you creepy dude.
There's a very popular trend on TikTok where women are at the gym and they're like calling out men as being creepy because the men are like looking at them and stuff like that. And in almost all of the videos, you can clearly see it's just some dude like just working out, doing his thing in the gym, but then they're like calling attention to it because he happened to glance over or something like that, because it's
like ridiculous. And people, it's crazy. It's like, so women, you know, look beautiful at the gym or wear some outfit at the gym, and a man is a man and he's sitting there like working out, he's taking a break in between the set, and he looks over and there's a woman in yoga pants doing something. He's supposed to like just avert himself. He just can't.
Okay, but I put myself through college.
And these girls are filming themselves being looked at. Like they want to be looked at. So they're filming themselves being looked at on purpose so they can go to their TikTok page. And anyway, that's the whole.
Okay, but I put myself through college as an aerobics instructor, and I used to have some creepy dudes who would just like sit in the back of my aerobics classes just to watch.
And then we got married.
Yeah, there are some.
And then she said yes.
And so that exists.
Just goes to show you this.
Yeah, persistence, right? Persistence.
I was going to say, yep, just attrition. It just if you keep showing up,
just whittled her down. No, I never went to one of your yoga classes, but I bought your videotapes. Okay, so we've got more news to get to here on the show, and for that today we are going to move over to Rumble in just a moment, because we've got two stories we absolutely cannot do on YouTube, although quite honestly the last one was pushing the limits. But so the next two stories we absolutely cannot do on YouTube, because there are things that we're going to talk about in these interviews with both a professor of MIT who just issued a bombshell report on mRNA. And we also have a reporter who broke an unbelievable story about tracking unvaccinated people. Both of those stories we would be kicked off. We cannot do those, so we have to move to Rumble for that. So make sure come join us. The stream will continue on our Rumble channel right now. We're not going anywhere, but you just need to jump over to Rumble for the rest of the show. That's rumble.com/redacted is our Rumble channel. But before we move over there, we want to tell you about our good friends over at Nom Nom, because dogs love to eat good food. They don't want to eat the garbage. You don't want to give your dogs fillers, stuff, bad food, right?
Absolutely. Your pet is a member of the family, so don't feed them the leftovers or the lesser quality of food. Nom Nom delivers fresh dog food with every portion personalized to your dog's needs, so you can bring out their best. Nom Nom's made with real whole food that you can see and recognize, without any additives or fillers that contribute to bloating and low energy. That's because Nom Nom uses the latest science and insights to make real good food for dogs. Their nutrient-packed recipes are crafted by board-certified veterinarian nutritionists, made fresh and shipped free to your door. Nom Nom has already delivered over 40 million meals to good doggies like yours, inspiring millions of clean bowls and tail wags. In fact, this is something, my mom just got a new puppy, and we went to visit the new puppy over the weekend, and this is something that we decided we're going to start to feed little puppy Cersei. Can you pull up a picture of Cersei while I'm finishing that ad? Try. Okay.
Where do I find it?
Because she's the cutest, period. And yeah, if you love your little doggy, give it a try. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. So right now, for 50% off, you can have a no-risk 2-week trial at trynom.com/redacted. That's trynom.com/redacted for 50% off. That's trynom.com/redacted. We'll get you that puppy picture later if we can't find it. But she is half King Charles Cavalier and half poodle. And she's like this tiny, and she's so cute that I just thought you'd like a puppy picture. So I owe you a puppy picture.
Yeah, I can't find it here. I see pictures of food and travel, but I can't find that one.
No problem.
Okay. All right. So now let's move over to Rumble, shall we? Thanks to all of you on YouTube. Please pop over to Rumble right now, rumble.com/redacted. If you don't know how to use Rumble, or you think like, oh, it's beneath me, I can't move over there, then I guess we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But Rumble has, well, some people are like, no, I'm so set in my ways that I can't jump over to a different platform that's free of censorship. And some people say, oh, the technology it's crazy, but Rumble has now, their platform has really advanced, and they've done amazing things. So their new interface they rolled out a few weeks ago is really fantastic. Like if you tried them a few months ago and you're like, I can't figure this out, give them another try, because they've done a lot of great things. And again, they won't censor us. So come on over, rumble.com/redacted. Come on over there right now.